So Artur Beterbiev wins a controversial majority decision over Dmitry Bivol to become undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world. It seems like whenever there's a big fight in boxing, whenever there's a big event, there's always some kind of controversy surrounding it. It just seems so rare these days where we can have a big fight, we get a result, we accept it and we just move on. And surrounding this fight, there's obviously controversy because many people are claiming that Dmitry Bivol was robbed. And I've got to be completely transparent. For most of today, I was rolling my eyes hard at that claim. I just didn't see it. Watching the fight last night live, came away thinking Beterbiev probably did enough. It was a close fight, a competitive fight, but I felt Beterbiev had done enough to deserve the victory. However, this evening, I've had the luxury of watching the fight back. So it's been uploaded onto Turkey Al Sheikh's YouTube channel, which is greatly appreciated because it gives us as fans the opportunity to pause, rewind, watch in slow-mo, watch on mute, which is always very useful. And that's exactly what I've done this evening. And yeah, I see the fight quite a bit differently to how I saw it last night. So my scorecard after rewatching the fight was 116-113 to Dmitry Bivol. A little bit of a strange scorecard, but that's because I had the 8th round even. I really struggled to split them in that round, so I did a Karl Froch and I gave it both ways, so 10-10. And even then, if I was quite favourable to Artur Beterbiev and I gave him that 8th round, he'd still be losing on my card. And so, watching the fight twice, I've had it go both ways on each occasion. So, yes, it is a tricky one, I definitely think. If you want an overall view of my scorecard, I basically had Dmitry Bivol sweeping the first 6 rounds. Now, some of those were really clear. Others, I felt like he just did enough, just a bit more to get them. I then had Beterbiev winning the 7th, had the 8th round even, as I've already mentioned. I gave the 9th to Bivol, and then I gave 10 through 12 to Artur Beterbiev. And despite that, because obviously I have Bivol winning the fight on this scorecard after rewatching, I can't help but feel that he was able to implement his fight more effectively. Obviously a fight is scored round by round, which is, important to consider. But even the rounds where Beterbiev had won on my scorecard, I still feel like Bivol was in control. Not by a massive margin, but I just felt like, as I say, he was the one who more effectively implemented his type of fight, his approach, where we saw a lot of that movement. He was working really well off that movement as well. I think his timing was fantastic and really sharp as well. Although I think we do have to give credit to Artur Beterbiev because even with his relatively basic approach, and notice how I say relatively because I'm comparing him to Dmitry Bivol, who is quite an advanced technician. Beterbiev, relative to Bivol and relative to the level that he's fighting at, I want to say he's quite basic technically. But he's very consistent. And obviously that basic but consistent approach is supported by his strength, his power, his physicality. Because he really is one of a kind in that department. It clearly was enough to disrupt Dmitry Bivol more than any other opponent. But that being said, I still think that a lot of the more consistent, the cleaner offense, or let me not say cleaner, let me just say more consistent, because Dmitry Bivol, we saw some of that precision from him, but I think he really struggled to nail Beterbiev, and that was one of the issues I figured he'd have when I was doing my prediction. I was picking Beterbiev not because I saw him as massively superior. I just think stylistically, he is someone who can inflict a hell of a lot of damage on his opponent in very in a very short time frame. And I figured that over the course of a 12-round fight, he would get that opportunity. And even if he was losing the rounds, I figured that his offense, that's more damaging, it would be more significant. It would have a more of an investment because of the damage that it would accumulate on Dmitry Bivol. Whereas Bivol, yeah, he's a fantastic boxer and he moves well and he's great technically, but I didn't see how he could keep Beterbiev under manners. And I feel like to a degree we did see that in this fight because, as I say, Bivol struggled to really nail Beterbiev because Beterbiev's guard, which is quite static, and I thought it would be a little bit of a liability in this fight, it paid off because Bivol threw a hell of a lot of punches. And yeah, a lot of them did go through, but a lot of them were blocked by Beterbiev. But yeah, Beterbiev, I thought he'd get to Bivol eventually, especially if he invested into the body, and he'd be able to slow Bivol down and probably stop him in about round 11. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but same kind of deal. I do think that Bivol really struggled to get the respect of Beterbiev just because he's accurate and he's sharp, but just didn't have the power, didn't have the physicality to really put a dent in Beterbiev. But that being said, I still think that he had enough finesse, enough skill, to get the beating of Beterbiev. At least that's what I saw second time around watching. The only thing is, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, I can kind of understand how people would leave with the impression that Beterbiev won. I mean, hell, like I thought Beterbiev won the first time I watched it live, which is always a tricky thing, even when you're watching from home. So especially if you're a judge and you're ringside and you're surrounded by the fighters' teams, you're surrounded by the thousands of people behind you who are reacting to everything. You know, how many times have you seen a fight where one fighter seemingly lands a massive punch on his opponent and the crowd go wild and they scream and shout, but then on slow-mo you see the punch actually didn't land. But in the moment, that reaction can actually have a real influence on the judges, and obviously the judges are only watching from one angle. So I think you do have to consider these things. And then also, there were moments in this fight where Bivol, I don't want to say he was distressed, but he was, a little bit disrupted by Beterbiev. And we know Beterbiev, he's a bit of a unit, he's a juggernaut. And so there were certain rounds that had a little bit of a bad, unfavourable visual for Bivol, where he maybe tucked up a little bit, was on the move a bit more. And you see Beterbiev kind of winging these big shots over, rattling Bivol a little bit, knocking him about. And even though it's not necessarily landing cleanly, as I say, it's not a good visual. It's not a favourable visual when that round is being scored. And obviously, the primary metric that we're going to be scoring a fight on is clean, effective punches. And there weren't a massive volume. This wasn't a fight where there were, consistent trades and both guys were landing flush. No, it was a real kind of chess match at times. And even if one of the guys were able to get off a punch, sometimes it was partially blocked, sometimes it wouldn't land like really flush on the knuckles. And so factoring all those factors, considering them all, I can kind of understand how someone would leave with that impression thinking, I think Beterbiev did enough. And take it from me, like I've watched it twice and I've had both guys winning on different occasions. So yeah, I understand the controversy, but at the same time, I think a robbery is a little bit too strong. And that is a term that gets thrown around a lot. But I think in this case, maybe Bivol's a little bit hard done by when you watch it with a very discerning and analytical eye. But at the same time, it's being scored in real time. And so I can understand how Beterbiev, someone, a judge, might favour him. But nevertheless, it was a good fight, an intriguing fight. Not the most entertaining. I'm certainly not in a rush to see a rematch, but I can understand if a rematch does happen. You guys know my view on rematches. But yeah, it was. It's boxing at the highest level. It doesn't get any higher than this. This is the elite of the elite. And not just in boxing, but at this level of sport in general, it comes down to fine margins. super fine margins, and these tiny influences, they can add up and have a real tangible effect on the final result. But yeah, if you want my opinion on the fight after watching it, with the ability to obviously pause, rewind, slow-mo, watch without any commentary to sway opinion, I do think that Bivol won. I do think he did enough. Even if, as I say, a bit more generous towards Beterbiev and given that even round, I think Bivol still wins by, 2 points. So, yeah, make of that what you will. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree? Leave it down below and I shall get back to you. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for listening and I'll catch you in the next video.